Welcome, my YouTube friends. Steven Crowder's exposing, not himself, the man behind the overblown COVID predictions. So, Steven, take it away.
Keep in mind, this is patient zero, right? You trace it all the way back. Where did the 2.2 million come from? Keep in mind, this is patient zero, right? You trace it all the way back. Where did the 2.2 million come from? This guy. It came from this guy. It's that simple. And people go, well, no, there must be something more to it, right? Because experts wouldn't get it that wrong, would they? Right. The guy killed all the sheep. You guys remember, well, a lot of you probably have forgotten, but don't you? I remember when the death toll was going to be 2.2 million.
Way back.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
That was
a couple
way
months
back.
ago.
What started.
So the 2.2 million number was assuming we didn't take precautions and social distancing and isolation. I've gotten into this fight with a guy on my Facebook who's like, oh, you were talking 2 million, we're nowhere near there. Because we took precautions. No, it just wasn't as bad as they thought. Okay. We'll find out, I guess, now that they're trying to reopen everything back up and just put people back to work. Because heaven forbid, poor people get money without working.
Started all of this, right? It was going to be 2.2 million deaths in the United States, 500,000 in the UK. Yeah. Those were the numbers that we heard, and we had to act now, just in case you think I'm making it up.
The British, rocked by a startling UK report warning of a catastrophic epidemic. The same research suggesting without any action, 2.2 million Americans could die.
If the U.S. doesn't take these steps, 2.2 million Americans could die.
Peter Navarro, who you saw on...
So I'm very, very curious how they're going to get around the fact that we took the steps and so we didn't get there. Like, their argument is that it wasn't as bad because their predictions were wrong. No, the predictions explicit, like even these clips he's using. We need to take these steps or we're going to face these deaths. It's like that episode of Futurama where Bender becomes God. When you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. Exactly. This is the problem. People think that when media hypes something up and it ends up being nothing, that means that it was nothing. No, the media talked about how we need to take these actions. These actions were taken, and thus the doom that was predicted didn't come. Yeah, exactly, Dodge.
On our air yesterday, he wrote 2 memos trying to warn the White House that coronavirus could cost the country trillions of dollars and kill up to 2 million Americans.
I mean, it has already cost the government $3 trillion just trying to prop up the stock market, so...
Fight against a pandemic that the White House has been warned could kill over 2 million Americans, more Americans than died at every war since 1776.
Without the strict social distancing, that number could be as high as 2 million Americans.
Okay, Steven, take it away. Tell us how they're wrong that the predictions made that if we didn't take these actions, we'd see these deaths, so we took those actions, so we're not seeing those deaths, means that the doctors who said this were wrong. Let's hear it.
So just to be clear, the virus is not, but that 2.2 million number was a hoax. Yeah. The number was a hoax. I'll get into there. 2.2 million, Bigfoot, Kavanaugh rape, balloon boy.
Yeah. Cavities.
I want to be clear.
Wow. Nice conflation, dude.
Where did this number come from? Because this was ubiquitous, right? This is the number that everybody believed, and we had to act, and we had to take drastic measures because 2.2 million, and we know now the numbers, it couldn't be possible in the United States if you actually look at our demographics and you look at the media. It's not a possibility here in the United States.
This is an angle I've not seen before. Now you have my attention.
It could have never been a possibility. But let me introduce you to the founder of the feast, the man who came up with this number, Dr. Neil Ferguson from the Imperial College in London. He is the one, again, responsible for the 2.2 million Americans will die number. Here he is advocating, China-style lockdowns.
I will now speak with Professor Neil Ferguson, Director of the Abdulatif Jameel Institute for Disease and Emergency Analytics, or JID for short.
Beyond those small outbreaks, one has to adopt the sort of community measures which have been adopted, particularly in places like Wuhan and China, where You try to reduce contacts between people in the community.
So why is this important? Well, it's important because it's the number that we all use, but there's a real pattern here. Again, while we're talking about I keep forgetting his name.
Dr. Neil.
I know Dr. Neil. You know what, from now on, I'm going to call him Neil for short.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil.
This guy has a pattern. So we'll start with the corona.
There's only one person on this show who actually failed as a comedian, but there's like 4 failed comedians on this show.
Coronavirus, but this is important because everyone has used him, they've cited him, and I think this is important to keep in mind when we talk about the experts, because everyone says this, whether you're talking about climate change, even if you're just saying, hey, listen, I believe the Earth is warming, I believe that human beings are contributing to it, I don't believe that the Paris Agreement will necessarily change it. The same case where they say, well, right now, if you don't believe that 2.2 million Americans will die, well, then why are you questioning the experts? Well, let me present a case as to why sometimes you should question the experts and do your own due diligence. So let's look at the coronavirus numbers. He came up with a 2.2 million number, and he refused to release the workings of the study. The model is based on a 13-year-old code that is completely undocumented. Okay? I want to be clear about that. And you know what else?
I mean, it's modeling virus behavior, and 13 years ago was 2007. So probably based on the last SARS outbreak we had. So that is probably what it's based off of. And just because it's 13 years old doesn't mean that it's... Also, undocumented means that it probably is something that the doctor himself wrote or something like that. Like, this is repeatable information. Just because the specific programmer or data used in the model is undocumented and 13 years old doesn't mean it's bad. You have to demonstrate why it's bad.
This is like the 77 cents on the dollar with Barack Obama when he was out there saying, women make 77, and you're going, does he not have access to even Bing, even if he doesn't have Google? If he's in communist China.
could help this guy.
Web crawler, for crying out loud.
GeoCities.
You wonder, hold on a second, why does nobody in power have the ability to question this number? Because this is the source of the number, and no one goes like, hey, yeah, what's your reference there? Doesn't that matter if we're going to shut down economies? And you know that he has no problem with it. Let's go back through all of his other predictions, okay? Considered an authority, an expert on the issue. In 2009, this man, Dr. Neil, he estimated that swine flu had a 0.4% death rate. Based on his advice, government in the UK, they estimated 65,000 dead. What actually happened, 457 deaths. The death rate was 0.026%.
So that's a little bit off.
Bird flu was another one he made a prediction. You know, you guys know. Actually, matter of fact, I could say that for all of these. That's true. It doesn't.
Credit where credit's due,
true.
okay?
You guys are
gotta
brilliant.
at least call us consistent.
The capital of virus.
So the bird flu, again, Dr. Neil, what did he say? He said
So again, I'm guessing that his prediction was based on no actions being taken, but instead what was the response to SARS? Had people wear masks, isolate symptomatic cases. You know, actions were taken to mitigate the effects of that. This is one of those things where they're assuming that they're given a number based on no actions being taken, and then a recommendation of actions being taken. And then when those actions bear fruit, well, we didn't need to take the actions, he was wrong anyway because of all these other times where he did the exact same thing. How does he not get that if it's a prediction, if nothing is done? Because Crowder is stupid. I mean, that's what it is. Crowder is lying.
2005, I believe, right, Neil?
Yes.
Is that what he said? In 2005? Yeah, 2005. He predicted 200 million bird flu deaths.
Wow. People, not birds. People.
Right,
People.
yes, people. Birds, who gives a
From bird flu.
Sorry, from bird flu. I don't want to get fact-checked by who.
I was screwing with him.
PETA, they're coming.
Oh, yes. People definitely thought you were talking about bird deaths when you just finished talking about bird flu. Jesus Christ. Crowder, you failed as a comedian. That means you're not funny. Stop trying because it's just cringe.
Coming for you.
What happened to the good where who they just had a few upturned noses and some wire left from the Grinch? Now they're dominating world economies.
Oh my gosh.
Screw them. So the reality is, there were only a few hundred in a decade, right? Bird flu deaths.
Ha. 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 Yeah, again, actions were taken to prevent it. Like, they give you the worst case so that it'll spur people into action. Like, this is common knowledge, I thought.
Less than 100 per year on average. And keep in mind, by the way, because right now they say, well, all of that, we didn't hit 2.2 million, we didn't hit 100 to 240,000 because of the lockdowns. No, actually, the numbers were revised long before the social distancing could have taken effect. And then again, you can look here at the bird flu. This was done without massive lockdowns. You were alive during the bird flu.
But there were other means of mitigating bird flu. We don't have any therapies to mitigate COVID. We don't have any disease that... literally, it's just whatever you can do to stop the inflammation, and if it gets worse, put them on a respirator or a ventilator. Like... oh boy. I forgot how stupid Crowder can be when he literally has to fight against science.
Do you remember this kind of a crash to the economy? Do you remember everyone being forced to stay in place at home? Another prediction, it was the, what was it called, like the foot and mouth disease?
Yeah.
I don't know the virological...
Jakob Kreuenfelter or something like that? Yeah, the hoof and mouth disease.
Nomenclature. Epidemiological... I just remember foot and mouth disease, which this guy does a lot.
The hoof and mouth.
So it was, he had a model, right, in his team at the Imperial College. They suggested millions of farm animals, okay, would have to be killed to prevent the spread, even if at the point there was no evidence of infection, okay? Now, what happened? Animal disease experts, keep in mind, experts. So an expert said, hey, this is going to spread. We have to kill all these animals. And other experts said, oh, yeah, okay, let's massacre. They said it looked like they had a culling. It was necessary, right? Because the model from Ferguson, well, it turns out that actually it was not necessary. They didn't take into account the species composition of farms. This is something that I read from some kind of sort of an epidemiological study. I don't really know what it means, but I do know that it was too late. Millions of animals had been killed. It cost the British economy 10 billion, well, actually 12.5 billion American dollars. This is all important because even if you look at this right here where they culled these animals, right, it cost $12.5 billion. It shows you that Dr. Neil, whose head comes to a point, is not, he's not scared.
Wait.
He has no problem with destroying an economy with panic. He's done it in the past. Ferguson made another prediction on mad cow disease. He said 150,000 deaths from mad cow, right? And this was based...
Mad cow is hoof and mouth. What? Isn't... right? Is foot and mouth is the same as okay, my mistake. Viral disease of cloven-hoofed animals. It does not have human... oh, okay, right. I think, didn't mad cow disease evolve out of foot and mouth? Well, no, they'd be completely different diseases. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy is believed to be caused by a protein called a prion, affects the central nervous system of cattle. BSA prions are highly stable. They resist freezing, drying, and heating at normal cooking temperatures. The disease is transmitted among cattle by the practice of feeding rendered protein from cattle, such as meat and bone meal, to cattle as a nutritional supplement. This practice has been banned in both the US and Canada. Okay. Wasn't there a hoof in mouth? Whatever. Okay.
Based on the theory back then that British sheep, if you remember this, British sheep might be capable of spreading it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, to date, there have been fewer than 200 deaths from mad cow disease in the United Kingdom, none of which have been transmitted from sheep.
I think this guy just hates animals.
What's
his deal? Like, got a grudge.
There's a disease. Kill all the animals.
Kill all the animals.
He got nipped by his pet cat once. He's like, I'll show you. Lay low for 42 years. Get myself into the Imperial College, so it's a trump card.
And then kill them all.
And I'll show your...
Again, anti-intellectualism. You're just in the college for cred or whatever. But he doesn't know anything. I mean, like, you would need to... Again, this is where we get into... You need to do some work to prove that this expert is wrong. And just showing all of the times where his estimate... Where he overestimated the number of deaths... Or where he mistakenly forgot to account for the number of what's the word I'm looking for here? The species composition of the places. That's like, mistakes happen. But his data is otherwise solid, so that's why we make allowances for mistakes. And again, his predictions are if nothing is done.
Descendants. By the way, you guys, we don't have enough time to run all the clips. You can go watch the news. Yeah. They're talking about this nonstop on CNN and BBC right now. They still are citing this guy. Keep in mind, this is patient zero, right? You trace it all the way back. Where did the 2.2 million come from? This guy. It came from this guy, just like the 77 cents.
No, it came from the data. He's just the one who... He was just the first name, I assume. Let's find out. Was this Neil guy the let's see. Here we go. Is his name the first one on it? Yep, Neil Ferguson. So he's just the primary researcher here. But all these other people checked the data. This is, again, another thing they like to do. They like to find a weak link to try to discredit the whole thing. And all he's doing here is proving how just because one person made a mistake, that doesn't mean that all the data is invalid. It's checked by a number of other scientists. You have to disprove each and every one of those scientists. You have to prove why they're wrong to discredit the Imperial College study. Can you do that, Crowder? I don't think you can do it in 6 minutes, but hey, let's find out.
And the dollar came from one study. All that comes from is taking the average salary of men across all different lines of work, regardless of hours worked, regardless of education, compared it with women. Yeah. It's that simple. And people go, well, no, there must be something more to it, right? Because experts wouldn't get it that wrong, would they? Right. The guy killed all the sheep. This is something that I think is...
Yes, there are a number... so, for what he's talking about, he was deliberately unclear about the wage gap. So... The wage gap is not that bad when you compare women in a field to men in the same field. But as he said, you take the average wage of all men in the economy and the average wage of all women in the economy, and women are 77 cents for every dollar that men make. And the reason for this is that women are socialized to go into fields that aren't as lucrative as men are socialized to go into. Funny how that works out. So then you say, well, but average, the average office worker makes, 98 cents for every dollar that the average office working man makes. And it's like, okay. But there's more men in the office, and women tend to be more things like waitresses and elementary school teachers and social workers and other jobs which don't pay as much as, athletes or CEOs, lawyers, doctors. I mean, what is the socialized assumption? Men are doctors, women are nurses. Who gets paid more? Doctors. Who does more work? Nurses. But because doctors get paid more, and there's more men doctors than women doctors, this is where the wage gap comes from. Yes, if you compare male doctors to female doctors, then they make about the same. But, yeah, that's where the wage gap comes in. That's why that data was useful.
Is important here. There is... Listen, we had, and I want to be clear, I think we all, well, actually I think some of you guys here wanted to pull me back a little bit initially. I was like, I think this is crap. all the way. You did too. And actually, you thought it was partially crap, but you were like, let's play it safe because we don't want to get fact-checked on air.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that you were more, looking back, you were more correct about how overblown it was going to be. I was like, oh, we should question some stuff, but I was definitely more drinking the Kool-Aid, and you were like, nah, I don't know. We'll check back in 60 days.
No, you were drinking my whiskey straight from the bottle.
Well,
and even that
right
had
before the shows.
I was like, what? You're like, Jameson kills it. I'm
It's
like, I don't
fine.
think that it does.
Hey, I asked Trump. It
does, yes.
Listen.
Again, there's like 4 failed comedians, even though only one person has ever tried to be a comedian.
But only if you
I
drink a
don't
lot.
drink, but if you're going to, Trump vodka, okay? That will kill it.
It's a fine liquid.
If we could get it
The best
into
liquid.
your lungs.
The best.
I'm saying waterboard Bill with Trump vodka.
Is there even a Trump
We had these. I think that when in the absence of data, it was prudent to take some precautionary measures. Sure.
Yes.
When we didn't know. Now, keep in mind, the absence of data, that's where people were reaching
And then once we had data, we realized we needed to take more action. See how that works?
for numbers, and they said,
Oh,
wow, 2.2
boy.
million.
Yeah.
And I still think we should have quarantined the sick. You can go back, and I said, why don't we just quarantine old people and sick people? Well, now people are saying that. Back then, people were saying, you monster. I'm like, listen, go take any time.
I don't think anyone said you monster to the idea of quarantining the sick and the elderly. I mean, so it obviously depends on how you present that, right? Because you could easily say, well, the only ones who are really in danger of dying are the old and the sick, so we should quarantine them. Everyone else, they'll be fine. And as I briefly touched on recently here, actually, no, I haven't touched on this on stream. I was thinking about that fight I was having with an idiot on Facebook. Just because you survive COVID-19 doesn't mean you survive unscathed. There's been a number of side effects of the disease, including severe harm to your respiratory system, mental issues. There's been a whole host of side effects of COVID-19. And these are all things that could be prevented by preventing people from getting the disease in the first place. But you're such a bootlicker, Crowder, that you just want to tell people to go back to work so that your businessmen, bosses, masters can keep making money. And they don't need money. They have plenty. But if their profits are down this quarter, then they can't buy a 5th yacht. So, get back to work. Some of you may die, but that is a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
Throughout history. Go back through, times around Christ.
Yeah.
There are no pits of non-lepers.
You reserve all the pits
lepers.
or lepers.
You don't...
You think maybe our medical understanding has come forward somewhat since leprosy was an issue? And yes, no one was calling you a monster for calling for quarantines of sick and old people. It's just that ignored the fact that there are a number of sick and old people who can't quarantine or who are dependent on young people to survive. And so if we let everyone else go out and about, then they're inevitably going to catch it. This is why nursing homes have been such an issue. Because they're all in there, and they have people who have to leave and come back, and those people can come back with the disease. This is why prisons have been such an issue. Because the guards have to leave and come back, and a number of prisons now are just hotbeds. Actually, I recently found out my cousin who works in corrections, he's a prison guard, he caught it. Now, he's young, he's super fit, and he'll be okay. But he may have exposed his parents, and they may have exposed our grandmother. So, his parents, again, they're pretty fit, they're relatively young. They're in their 50s or 60s now. But grandma, she's in her 80s. If she catches it, that's exactly the kind of thing she's gonna die. And although he's already over it, and apparently just had a real mild case of it, Grandma may not be so lucky. This is why we called for quarantine, why we called for isolation, why we called to shut everything down. And then the government decided to spend $3 trillion in the stock market instead of making sure that people had the money they need to survive so that we can keep this under control. Not to mention that we could have just done a 2-week lockdown 2 months ago and probably would have had it under control. But no. We can't be locked down for 2 weeks, so instead we're in lockdown for 3 months.
Throw in the non-lepers. You don't keep them separate and let the lepers run free.
Very true.
This is what you don't quarantine
Lepers
the sick.
can't
But
run.
at one point we had hypothetical numbers. We needed to work with these models. And as a matter of fact, actually, if you go to the website, we didn't work with those models. There were plenty of other epidemiologists who were experts who were just considered contrarians who said this really doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. And we tried to cover that. We just have to be
Source. Cite your source, please. Should I even bother looking? No. Yep. No. No models, no examples, nothing. Okay.
careful because big tech gets together and they will remove videos. They removed the videos from these. What were the names of those doctors from Los Angeles? Was it Los Angeles County?
Yeah.
5 million plays. 5 million plays. They had several thousand people who they've actually tested for antibodies, and they were saying the death rate is 0.1%.
Yep.
Got removed from Facebook because it violated guidelines.
Oh, it's fake according to
So
them.
we've had to try and be consistent. We've had to try and be authentic, but also we've had to try and navigate Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, who, by the way, take their marching orders directly from the World Health Organization, who said...
No, they don't. They don't take marching orders from the WHO. Like... If they did, then there are a number of accounts that would be suspended. I guarantee it. No, what they do is they go by what is the best information available. And that generally comes from the WHO. There's definite issues with the World Health Organization. But they generally seem to have the best interests of the majority of people in mind. So when they make a recommendation and when they say this information is true, that's the sort. This is the issue. If we don't trust the WHO, if we don't trust these medical experts, then who do we trust? Well, I know who Crowder thinks we should trust. But what about the rest of us who live in fucking reality, Steven? I trust WHO and CDC more than I would trust Crowder or some internet bro who did his research on YouTube. Yeah, exactly, Aramil. Yep. That's exactly the point. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here. They're trying to discredit these actual medical experts so that you will buy into his propaganda and they can control the populace that way. They don't care about people dying. They care about their wealthy backers not making money.
By the way, not that long ago, that it couldn't be transmitted through human-to-human contact. So when you're...
Oh, God, not this bullshit. So, this was a novel virus. They had never seen a virus of this type, this strain, before. We've seen other SARS, we've seen other coronaviruses. Yes, I understand. This was a new kind of coronavirus. So we didn't know its capabilities. And early on, apparently, it seemed like it wouldn't be transmitted. Now, this is something that gets misquoted a lot. I actually recently watched the, Plandemic fake news, please give haircuts. Exactly. This is something that, while I was doing stuff last night, I was listening to the Destiny Nuance Bro debates. And one thing that they talked about in the second debate was how the WHO said initially that that COVID-19 could not be transmitted through human contact. Humans couldn't spread it. And what actually happened was that they said, so far we don't have any evidence that it can spread human to human, but based on the way these diseases have behaved in the past, we can probably assume that that it will spread, but we don't have any proof. And then like a week later, they had proof that it could spread human to human. So what they did was they said, we don't have any proof, but let's assume that it does. And then a week later they said, here's our proof. It does spread human to human. So the WHO never said that it definitely doesn't spread human to human. This is a lie propagated by conservative media to try to discredit the WHO, especially after Trump pledged to defund them and started shit-talking them. Because they got to prop up their God Emperor.
You're using them as your Washington Post or Snopes or Southern Poverty Law Center fact checkers. At what point do you say, you know what? Maybe the contrarians are right, because it doesn't take a scientist or an expert to have studied any virus ever and said, you know what? I think that if you start fondling someone who has it, that's a bad idea. It's a slippery slope. It's a sweaty, clammy slope. I think what we're seeing right now is we are seeing the theoretical, unfortunately.
What was that? No, it doesn't take an expert to tell you that fondling someone who has the disease is a bad idea, but it does take an expert to say, okay, how much contact can we allow without risking transmission? Is it any contact? Is it being in the same room? Like, again, that 6 foot number is not that the disease magically stops at 5 feet 11 inches. It means that 6 feet is the best space to prevent direct physical contact and help mitigate how much of another person's air you breathe functionally. I mean, it's still not good, and people should not be that close for extended periods of time. But in situations where they have to be that close, it's better than being pressed right up against each other. And that takes an expert to figure out. Again, this anti-intellectual bullshit Crowder and his ilk engage in, where they find any little tiny thing they can pick at, anything they can claim is an Achilles heel or a weakness that they can pull out, and they think like a house of cards, the whole thing will come tumbling down. And what they don't understand is that it's not a house of cards. It's a pyramid of bricks. And if you take a brick out from the bottom, the rest of it just stays solid. So you got to take each brick out. You got to pick each one apart. But they state it as this done thing that this is how it is. This is wrong. So everything downstream of this is wrong. I really wish guys like this would just be honest and say, I just don't give a shit how many people die. I need people to buy this coffee. Yeah. Like, I would have a lot more respect for someone like Crowder if they were just like, look, I don't care how many peasants die as long as I can get a haircut, go to Chili's, and my coffee is delivered on time. But they can't say that because most people would rebel against that. Because most of the people who are fans of him are the people who are going to die.
Clashing with the real world. Okay, so it was theoretical. We could lose 2.2 million lives. We could, now we're going to revise it. We could lose 100,000 to 240,000 lives. Right? We could
lose that. No, the statement was, unless we take these actions, the numbers are looking at 2 million dead. That was the statement. It wasn't we could. It was, if we don't take these actions, this will happen. We took those actions, so we revised the estimate. And again, this is kind of an issue with coming out with an estimate like that. It makes 100,000 deaths sound like, whew, we dodged a bullet there, rather than the monstrous failure of the system that it is.
Whatever, how many tens of millions of people are infected, though that's actually something that seems like it's probably accurate. Though they don't want to report on that now because then all of a sudden that lowers the death rate. So we could have those, but now we have real world data where we've tested people for antibodies. What do we have? We have New York City,
and the antibody test is not super reliable. So even if you test everyone and everyone has the antibodies, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is recovered and immune to it. It just means that everybody has the antibodies. We don't know exactly what the antibody test means yet. You know, we don't know if this is like, we don't know if this is like some diseases where you've had it, you get over it, and then you can get it again, or if this is like most diseases where you've had it and that's it. I mean, the flu is kind of different because the reason why you have to get a flu shot every year is that the specific strain of regular influenza that goes around is different than it was last year. But you get a flu shot and it's taken care of. So if you have the flu antibodies this year, then you're not going to get sick. But some diseases don't work that way, unfortunately.
Los Angeles County, Santa Clara County, we have Miami-Dade County, we have Chelsea in Massachusetts, we have a few more, I don't have them off the top of my head. Every single one has revised their death estimates, their mortality rate, I should say, to 0.5 to 0.1%, and that's including the 95% of whom are people over the age of...
Proof? Because I literally just came across this study. Let's see. It was case fatality rate COVID-19. Here it is. I came across this study when I was fighting with that idiot on Facebook, and go down here to the conclusion, and their final numbers estimated to be 1.3%. Now, seasonal influenza is 0.1%. And they said that it could go anywhere from 0.66 to 1.4%. But this is based on the most recent data, as far as I can tell. So I don't know where you're getting this 0.1 or 0.5% number, Crowder. It's not from data. It's not from scientists. Probably from the same place you got that fucking mug and that shitty coffee.
80 and have pre-existing conditions. Every single one that has run these studies. So you can even say maybe they're getting too many false positives with these antibody tests. Okay, let's double it. The people who said this is more comparable to the flu were so much closer than the experts who said 4 to 7%. It's laughable. And we have real-world data now in that we see...
Keep in mind that the people saying 4 to 7% were basing that on the data in their country or in their area. It's been revised down because we don't have so many fucking cases. And we've developed somewhat more mitigating strategies for dealing with people who come down with it. This is where it comes, this is what we mean when we talk about how Crowder and his ilk will bend science to say what they want it to say. Because science is not saying that we are at... Science is not saying that, oh, it was 4.7, but now we've revised our data. No, we've revised our data because we revised our strategies. Fewer people are getting infected. We have more resources available for the people who do get infected. We've learned what does and doesn't work. Like, a big part of the reason why the number was 10, 12% in Italy there for a while was because there were so many people infected that they couldn't handle them all. But now we've social distanced enough that we're started to keep people from getting new infections or get fewer people getting new infections. So the death rate is going down because our medical system can better handle it.
How many people have died? We see how communicable it is. We don't know the extent of that, but by the way, all testing shows us between 4 to 6%, 4 to I think 6.5% depending on the county. That means that far more people have been affected. We have real-world data now. That what is it, 22 million? Are we at 24 million jobless claims?
I wonder if he realizes that the Imperial College study was based on real-world data. Like, it took data from China, from South Korea, from Italy, and it ran it through the model. Like, this is not a case where we had no data and we're guessing. We have more data now, but we had data back then. We just, have more data now.
claims at this point.
I thought it was a little higher than that.
It could be significantly higher than that. We have real-world data now that 1 in 5 suicides is linked to unemployment. We have real-world data now that we've crippled economies. We have real-world data now that 36% of retail industries might not reopen after this economy. And that is clashing with the theoretical, which we know is verifiably false, but unfortunately, big tech.
How are you proving it false? All you've done is brought up a bunch of times where the lead researcher made recommendations of actions to take and the consequences of not taking those actions. And then we took those actions and then it wasn't as bad as he thought. And citing one example where he was, where he failed to consider the species makeup of different farms. This is not the case you think it is, Crowder. I'm sorry.
And their overlords want to silence doctors right now who are out there espousing the.
We want to silence doctors who are going against the data. Jesus Christ.
The real world observable data at this point. So at one time, sure, in the absence of data, I think it was prudent to take some precautions.
All right, I'm done here. It wasn't an absence of data, you fucking moron. We had data. We have more data now. That doesn't mean the data we had was incorrect or that the models we built off of that data was also incorrect. It means that we made assumptions, we ran our model based on data, and now we have more data, and we have taken actions based on what the initial data told us. God, Crowder's a fucking moron. But it's good content. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked it, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you. See you next time.